This is Wellness Week number 103, and it's Thursday. And of course, today, the one and only, the icon, the man, Dr. Dennis Courtney, is here with his eye protocol that is not only unique to the area, to the country, to the world, right? You're about to learn some things that are going to blow you away. And Dr. Courtney and I mean, we go back a long time.
Yes, we do, Joe.
We did a few radio shows together where he introduced me. Now I'm introducing him. It's come full circle. Hold on to your seats, folks. Doc, take it away.
Joe, thank you very much for those kind words. I'm really pleased to be here with you today. I think there are members in the audience that happened to listen into an interview I did last week on radio, and I announced that I would be here at Nutritional Frontiers on Thursday, and I thank you all for coming if that happens to be you. We need to talk about something that you will never hear from any other doctor. Well, I know for sure in this country. What I'm not sure of, but I have a feeling I'm making this statement about any doctor in the entire world, although that's a pretty big what if. So we're going to keep it clean and say, at least in this country, you can't hear what you're about to hear from any other doctor. Because in these eye diseases of the retina, the retinal diseases are those diseases which usually happen in patients of advancing age, number one. Number two, with those afflictions and your ophthalmologist, very brilliant ophthalmologist, I do not downgrade them whatsoever. They are a product of what they are taught, and they can only use the tools that they are provided within their professional skill set. So I'm not coming down on those doctors. Unfortunately, they have no idea that the diseases that they claim, and unfortunately they tell you nothing can be done. Have you ever heard that before? This is rife in the medical community, and especially the ophthalmological community, with people with these retinal diseases. Now, you've heard their names, things like macular degeneration, wet or dry, diabetic retinopathy, the big one, the one that leads to total, complete, dark, black blindness, glaucoma. There are other diseases found in the young, such as retinitis pigmentosa. The unifying factor with all of those diseases is that they are all diseases of the retina. And ladies and gentlemen, in the conventional medical community, if you have a disease of the retina, there is, and I want to underline, and I want to repeat, and I want to emphasize, there is no known treatment to interfere in that disease. That your kind and very knowledgeable ophthalmologist has to be a bystander and watch you deteriorate, which you will. I don't know whether that deterioration is going to be a slow one. I don't know whether it's going to be a fast one. All I know is you're going downhill, and each and every day you're going to lose a little more of that vision, and you will not and cannot, because there is no treatment in the conventional world to do it. You will not be able to reverse, either A, stop the disease, or B, reverse the disease, which is exactly what I want to talk to you about today. My problem is, we might as well just get it up front. It sounds so unrealistic that I understand why people who just hear of these statements would have to say something like, oh, this Dr. Courtney, he must be a scam artist. Because, first of all, any eye doctor you ever ask about this will say, I never heard of such a thing. And he's honest. He never did. He really can't hear of it because it's antithetical to his own medical practice. And yet to have a doctor like me, I am not an eye doctor. By the way, I am an anesthesiologist, worked for many years in hospitals anesthetizing people for their surgery. But as you all know too, I moved outside of that operating room. I moved into an office practice, and that office practice is very different. The fact that you're here at Nutritional Frontiers says you are very different. You look at health from through a completely different lens than most people. And you've learned that the pursuit of health has great advantages for you. Unfortunately, in medicine, as we're going to learn, those advantages are not available to any doctor who only understands the conventional method. I am a medical doctor. I went through that training. I am the equivalent of every one of your doctors that you ever visited because we're all trained alike. But when I moved into that practice, I really gave up treating people that in a way that I was taught to treat them, which was to use drugs. And here I am telling you right up front, I don't use drugs. Seems a little crazy for a medical doctor to make a statement as bold and as brazen as that, but it's my credo. We have to create health. We can't use drugs to alleviate symptoms. All we do is create a bigger problem. If you go to a doctor and you have a complaint and you say, well, this is bothering me. The doctor thinks, how can I alleviate that symptom to make he or she happy? And he guesses. He takes a guess to figure out what drug he's going to choose. Now, if he hits it and it alleviates your symptom, and he was successful at shutting you up, you put him on par with the reincarnation of the Messiah. You feel he's the greatest doctor that ever lived. What he has just done, my dear friends, it borders on criminality. Why do I make such a negative statement? Because the very disease that provoked that symptom is now quashed and lies underneath. And its head will never surface until many years go by. But that disease is going nowhere. You keep on taking your medicine to alleviate your symptoms. You keep putting your doctor on par with the Messiah. But one day, this disease is going to rear its ugly head. And at that point, it's going to be out of control. And now you're looking at your mortality square in the face. But this issue was brought up to you when you were in your 20s and 30s and 40s. And it's a different story now that you're in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. So let's take those initial statements and move to a discussion of the eye where I believe there is no equal. Why is it, by the way, how is it that we here in Pittsburgh have the blessing to be able to offer something that's offered no other place in the world? How did that happen? Well, I cannot claim as the inventor of this therapy. I have a very good friend who approached me in the late 90s, a very well-known eye doctor from the Pittsburgh area. His name was Dr. Ed Condrat, and I'm going to apologize for that. I'm shutting that phone off right now. So anyway, Dr. Condrat approached me in the late 1990s. He was very well known here in Pittsburgh. He had a partner named Stout. They were on KDKA blasting their commercials every day, all day. And he approached me and he said, hey, look, Dr. Courtney, I would certainly love to learn what you know about alternative medicine. Because by that point, I was a pretty well-established alternative medicine doctor. Unbeknownst to you, there is no school that you go to become one of me. The only thing that can happen for you is that somebody with these skills mentors you, takes you under their wing, and provides the training you need to let you fly on your own. But there's an obligation that comes with that mentoring, because if ever approached by any other doctor in my future that asks me, hey, could you help me learn what you know? I am obligated personally to do so. I have to pay back. And so I paid back. And I taught Dr. Ed everything I knew about the alternative medicine field. Now, remember, I'm not an eye doctor, but he was. And so he took what I used and he applied it to the eye. So Ed is the inventor of this entire program based on the skills that I taught him. So in a way, I was involved with the evolution of this treatment, but he put the program together. He then taught me the program, and I became so good at it. I'm now the only doctor in the country that can do it. So that's why Pittsburgh has a program and no one else does. So we referred to this little talk today as Restore Your Lost Vision Now. If you that sit in front of me are afflicted with any one of these retinal diseases, you are not a happy camper. You are scared to death about your vision and the loss of it, and that it's continuing to deteriorate. I have been told by many patients, at first when I was told this, I couldn't understand it, but with these many years in, I do understand it, and that is, they say to me, look, I'd rather die than go blind. And when I was first told it, I couldn't identify with it. But over these many years now, I've found that to be an understandable comment made by somebody that just would wish to have their vision restored. What you need to know is that that can happen. And now we're going to be talking about how that is. Restore Your Lost Vision Now, the 3-step program to regain your sight. You know, there's something magical and mystical about the number 3. The number 3 scares nobody. I mean, when you hear there's 3 steps, you got to be saying to yourself, this sounds like a piece of cake. And actually, it is. So we don't get up into numbers like 10 and 15 because you'll run away. Yet, if we reiterate that this is a 3-step program, we're going to be talking about it. You don't need to run at all. This is all within your ability to correct your own disease. And if you're here today and you're unafflicted, I want to commend you on your good health. But I want you to be my advocate, because if you're not afflicted, somebody in your family is. And if there's nobody in your family that is, some acquaintance of yours is. And they're sitting now with the misery of this disease, being treated by their ophthalmologist who can do nothing. Please pass this on to them. Let them know that there is a way to correct their lost vision. And then I really want to thank you for becoming that advocate with the information that you learned today. Now, it had to be done. And my good friend, Dr. Ed, never did it. I don't know why. I had to write a book. There has to be a book. There has to be a manual. There has to be a laid out plan that you could easily read on your own. And so I wrote the book that needed to be written. Ed, I don't know what he did. I don't know what was on his mind, but he wrote a book. And his book was called The 10 Eye Essentials. And although it really bears no resemblance to what we do in the 3-day program, I don't know why he did that. But if you were leaving the bookstore and there were 2 books sitting there at the exit, and one book said the 3-step program to restore your vision, and the other said the 10 eye essentials, which one are you going to buy? Nobody wants 10 of anything. He misnamed that book. He scared people away. But 3 was soothing, And we've named this the 3-step program, which we're now going to explain. You may have been told, please feel free to come right through and get yourself comfortable. Oh, we got a close up of me, huh? Right on, Ed. We're good. Yeah. So you may have been told nothing can be done to improve your vision. Things like just live with your poor vision, and then that day comes when you're going to have to give up your driver's license. And that is a big moment because if you lose that license, you've lost your independence. And it is a critical issue that most patients with these retinal diseases have to contend with. This little bit of an I Love Me page just tells a little bit about my story. The only thing I'm going to mention is if I have any God given ability, it's certainly not as a doctor. I had to fight, as every medical doctor does, to learn everything that was required of me, and it was a battle. But God did bless me with something that I just have, and that is I'm a natural born teacher. Can't you tell? So it can be no surprise to you that I was a high school teacher as my first startup into the world. This particular item of me is my greatest asset. So I taught sophomore in high school for years. Now I teach every one of my patients. When you come to see me, you're probably going to be there an hour and a half, and I'm going to make sure you understand every single part of every disease you have and what our plan is going to be to get that turned around. So everything else about me is minimal. That teaching ability is what has brought me to the forefront. Let's examine that 3-step program and start off by saying nothing can be done. Once again, is a fallacy. Nothing can be done is not allowed to even be uttered in my office. You're not allowed to say that. I know everybody else tells you, unfortunately, nothing can be done, and your eye doctor's top of the list. But we're going to reject that. That is not factual. That is incorrect. And implant that in your mind. Do not settle for not getting results. Only settle for those treatments that lead you to the goal you wish to achieve. There are limits to conventional treatment. And the reason is in this one statement. As a medical doctor, you name the disease, we are taught to try to kill that disease. We're supposed to choke it. We're supposed to stamp on it. We're supposed to wring its neck, hit it with a hammer. The mentality is you go after that disease, doctor, you kill the disease. Unfortunately, you can never beat any disease, any, with these conventional tools because a disease is so powerful, you can't kill it. It goes on. You can't name me a drug, and that includes antibiotics, that by the use of that drug cured anything. Because if you don't have an immune system in harmony with that antibiotic, and it comes to mind the poor population of the AIDS afflicted, that's autoimmune deficiency, and you have no immune system. A patient with AIDS will die. I don't care what antibiotics they're giving them from an infection that a newborn will get through in 3 days. If you don't have an immune system, you have no defense. Integrative medicine, or you want to call it alternative medicine, or you want to call it whole, I don't care what you call it. By the way, some people call it voodoo. And I'm okay with that too. That just shows me you don't know what you're talking about. But I have to deal with people that really don't have an awareness about the power behind these other forms of medicine. But in integrative medicine, we use the efforts to reestablish health. If you can do that, you can conquer any disease. We in conventional medicine are not trained in that. We in the alternative world are, and it's our great advantage and why I could leave the operating room, moved into a practice completely antithetical to what my training was all about to begin with, and have better success than I ever had with any of the treatments that I use as a conventional doctor. You can beat a disease by reestablishing health. But we got to have a paradigm shift. Something's going to change here. And we have reduced this treatment to 3 steps to restore your vision. These are the offenders. I've already mentioned them vocally. You see yourself on that list. MACD, glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, retinitis pigmentosa, macular hole, optic neuritis, Stargardt's, and more. Every one of these has no solution at all in conventional medicine. In my world, these are routinely handled with great success, as I will begin to explain more and more. Folks, here are those 3 steps. I told you the number 3 was soothing. There's nothing overwhelming about 3 steps. These are the 3. Let's just briefly go through these 3 and making a case for why it was that they played a role in the very disease that you're manifesting right now. Because all 3 of these things did. And we have to reverse them. So as the list says, step 1, correct all deficiencies. And you have a lifetime worth of deficiencies. And we now have to correct them. Number 2, remove all toxicities. My goodness, you're a Pittsburgher. You soak this stuff up, as I did, especially in the days of our steel mill days. We're not the greatest of anti-pollution now anyway. We still rank up there pretty high, but nonetheless, those toxicities are playing a role in your disease. And then this third one, which you would never think of, I will really get into great detail when it comes to it. But optimized perfusion means bringing a blood supply to the area that's afflicted. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have a retinal disease, you have no blood supply, a healthy blood supply going to your retina. How do you expect the retina to function if it can't receive blood flow and nutrients and remove toxic substances away from it? How is that ever supposed to work? It can't. And the conventional medical community is helpless in trying to restore it. We are not helpless. We have so many ways of restoring that blood flow that we're going to talk about today that I believe it's the key component of the 3. So let's take this first one, correct all deficiencies. Look, every single one of you, if you have an eye disorder, had a genetic proclivity to develop that disorder from birth. It was your eyes, you didn't know it. It was your eyes that were your weak point. And it laid way underneath the surface. You were unaware of this. But in the early days, as you were teenagers and adults, your diet was what your diet was. And it was based on what was served in the home. And that was determined by your culture, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic, everything went into that equation, and mom served what mom served. And whatever nutrients were lacking, folks, they were just lacked, and they were continuously ignored and missed, and you didn't know it. At the time, you were very young and you had workarounds in the metabolic pathways in order to create energy, and you were able to use these workarounds. Unfortunately, as we age, we lose those workarounds. And the day comes where finally that element that you were born with gets to manifest itself. Your weakness was your eye. That's where the disease emerged. There are other people sitting in this city right now. They're in a group this large, and they're there to talk about kidney disease. Why? Because that was their weak organ. They had the genetic proclivity to develop problems, and they lacked in nutrition, and they acquired deficiencies. And finally, as they got into advancing years, they manifested through their weak part, and they finally had known kidney disease that they have to treat. So we all have these genetic potentials. The key is whether we're ever going to manifest them, and what leads to the manifestation. One component for sure are these nutritional deficiencies of a lifetime. So, how do you correct them? It's what you put in your mouth that determines correcting them. So, your foods and how you select your foods absolutely have to be discussed. And during our seminars, when we do these actual treatments, we spend a great deal of time. I'll shorten up the lecture to this point. I'm not there when I run these programs, which are 3 days long, to work with everybody's nutritional needs individually. We have people that do that. So I make a deal. I say, look, as long as you eat organically, I don't care what you put in your mouth. Even though I do care, like I wouldn't want you to be eating large amounts of sugar, but I even tell them, look, if you want to have sugar cane that's organic, go right ahead. Just keep out those chemicals, get away from HMOs, the scientifically created foods is the ones I'm talking about. The ones that we're eating now, and we can't seem to be able to avoid them. Our diets are loaded with them. Move into the organic world, and we're going to be okay in terms of diet until somebody else straightens out your individual needs. If you started today with the greatest diet in front of you each evening as you eat, where we stand today in our culture is that I think I heard this, that in today's world, it would take a bushel of apples to be the nutritional equivalent of one apple of the 1950s. The reason is our farming has taken all the nutrients out of the soils. They're chemically related now because everyone has these things are being, the agricultural community is just inundated with various forms of them. But you can't eat your way to health, no matter how hard you try. So you're going to have to do supplementation. We'll talk about that sensible supplementation during our time together over those 3 days, but you'll leave with a pretty doggone good idea of how to reverse them. Now, I ask you this question, and I'm going to ask it 2 more times. Do you think that in 3 days, I'm going to be able to correct the deficiencies of your lifetime? Are you kidding me? Can't happen. Won't happen. But I'm going to get you started. I'm going to get you on the way so that you can't let this alone. You have to work with it. But in 3 days, I'm not going to be able to make even a blip on that radar screen. Keep that in mind. I know it. You know it. Step 2, remove all toxicities, Pittsburghers. Remove all toxicities. There are so many toxic substances that are bound up in your cells that even if your cell wants to work, it can't. These toxic substances prevent it from working. And in your cases, it's your retina that's your weak point, and therefore it's the toxic substances that have accumulated in your retina that have to be removed. They have to be removed so that cells in your retina can work once again. So, we're going to have a discussion about the various ways that you can alleviate that burden of toxic substances. And I'll ask you the question that I said I was going to ask 3 times. Now, for the second time, do you think that in 3 days, I'm going to be able to alleviate your entire toxic burden of a lifetime? No, can't be done. But boy, am I going to get you started. You can't ignore this. You want to be able to see again. You want to be at your maximum. I'm going to show you the road to get there. And these first 2 steps cannot be ignored. They accrued over a lifetime, but you're going to take maybe a year, maybe a little longer to be able to accomplish that objective. But you will accomplish the objective. Now, that was step 2. This is a 3-step program. So removing heavy metals, that's part of the toxic substances that we have to deal with. Now let's move to step 3. To me, and I don't know why this was so, this was just a natural. I always have thought this way. Come to find out that my very intelligent and my alternative doctors that I come to know and admire, once I was a member of their organizations, they would have conferences. I would go to them. They would sit around the bar after the conference was over, just with sheer chit chat. And I was a listener. I was too much of a rookie to have the nerve to open my mouth. Not in front of these greats that had written all the books. What? They're going to listen for me? No, I don't think so. So I'm listening and they're talking. And every single one of them never misses the opportunity to discuss how you optimize your nutrition, how you correct your deficiencies. Come to think of it, can you remember a doctor you ever went to that claimed to be alternative that ignored that? That's a staple item. You are here at Nutritional Frontiers because they are the bastion of being able to get back that which you haven't been able to provide yourself. So I hear them talk about this, these great minds. They talk about toxicities, how to remove them. And I'm listening to this and it's going back and forth and back and forth. And all of a sudden I'm saying to myself, hey, I'm murmuring underneath my breath, where's number 3? And so finally I got brave enough to put up my hand and say, guys, what about number 3? And they looked at me. First of all, the fact that I piped up was startling to them because I was like a bump on a log over there in the corner. But they said to me, hey, what do you mean number 3 to me? And my answer back to them was, what do you mean about what do I mean about number 3? Because to me, I read that as they don't even know there's a number 3. And I'll be doggone if they didn't know. He said, come on, kid. Come on, kid. You got to fess up. We're dying to know what's number 3. I go, guys, I'm shocked, but nonetheless, you want to give all these nutrients? How in the hell are they supposed to get into the tissue you need to revive? You have to have a blood supply. If you don't have it, it ain't happening. And so they went, yeah, that seems right. I said, you're damn straight that's right. And you, with all this stuff about chelation and removing heavy metals and the like, how do you expect that those toxic substances are going to be able to be transported out of those tissues unless you have a blood supply? Well, now, after those two, they went, "We surrender, kid. You're all right. You're now in the club." And automatically, I got elevated to a different status. And I maintained that status for as long as I was a member of those organizations, and I still really am today. But this thing with the perfusion, everybody has missed. Nobody works with it. I do. And it's the reason why we can do what we claim we can do in 3 days. I'm not going to fix your nutritional deficiency in 3 days. I am not going to be able to have an impact on your toxic load, but am I going to light up the back of your eye with a blood flow in a nanosecond? And this is why we can be successful, because in 3 days, I can rescue enough retinal tissue that the patients who participate in these 3-day programs will have a substantial improvement in their vision in 3 days. It happens bar none all the time. I get rather selfish about making certain that I document with clarity the fact that it does happen. And I'll be showing you a video of my eye doctor that goes to all of my patients. I feel if you're coming to Pittsburgh to see me, and by the way, they have come from all over the world. I've been amazed. And I think the reason that's so is if you're going blind and your very nice eye doctor tells you nothing can be done, you don't give up. There's something called the internet, and they find me. The furthest patient that ever traveled to see me and be treated was from Australia. 16 time zones, she said, she crossed to get to me, and she got to go through 16 more to go back. But she was happy she made that trip. But they've come from all over the world, England, Africa, India, Brussels, you name it. And because this 3-step program, it really does work. Optimize the perfusion is the missing link. It's the key, not just to this disease. If you come to see me about any disease, we're going to be talking about these 3 things. We just needed to have modalities that could get this perfusion up to speed in a way that your back of your eye was engorged with the blood flow the moment I turn that device on. What you're looking at here is at a capillary level. So an artery goes to your eye. And as it gets in close to the eye, it begins to branch into smaller arteries, which then branch into even smaller arteries, which then branch into these things. See on the left side, the word arteriole. And then finally, right at the end of that little stub, you're now at the capillary level. And what you see inside the capillaries are single red blood cells. So this can only be seen microscopically, but it can be seen. And so those red blood cells and the fluid around it comes in close contact with the cells, which are those little balls that have the purple centers in them. And nutrients are brought to those cells and let the cells metabolize them. The waste products that are given up on the right side all come together and are moved out of the region through what's called a venule. See that little stub on the right? And the venule keeps getting larger until it forms veins. And then it finally forms the mother vein, which is called the vena cava, and returns it back to the heart. But that thing right there, if that's your retina, and so I'm claiming that the cells you're seeing there are your retinal cells, and there's no blood flow going to them. And as long as that condition is allowed to exist, your vision remains as bad as it is. And what's worse is it will continue to deteriorate, and you don't want that to happen. Greater blood flow improves tissue function, and it only makes sense that it should. This, although we're not going to go into great length, this is an overview. By the way, this all appears on my website. So if you want to see the entire lecture given again, all you have to do is go to pittsburghiprotocol.com. And as you scroll down through there, you'll come to a number of videos. The first video you'll come to says, attend a webinar. Folks, you are at a webinar. You're at a seminar, and that very same seminar is repeated on my website if you need to see it. This page talks about all the components of a 3-day program. I'm not going to get into many of those particular items. I will point out to you that if I had the list of all those modalities, what is the key piece? What piece of that puzzle is the magic box? I have no trouble in delineating what that is. You see something marked on the upper part of the second column, FSM. That stands for frequency specific microcurrent. It's all based on frequencies, and every single thing in this universe, every single part of you shakes. Everything shakes. Now, you can't see it shaking, but it's vibrating. And every single thing has its own signature vibratory rate. And your retina, I happen to know by an informed source, a healthy retina shakes at 37 hertz. Guess what? For the multitude of you sitting in this crowd right now, if you are afflicted with an eye disease, I know what frequency your retina is not resonating at. You are not at 37. You're at some other number, and that number is usually lower, not higher. But as long as it's unhealthy and cannot vibrate at 37 hertz, you remain afflicted. But the moment I utilize this device, wham, your retina is vibrating at 37 hertz in a nanosecond. What control, what ability, and the therapeutic potential that results from that is why I can say this is the number one magic box of all the modalities that we use. We'll talk about others of those at another time if you ever have an interest in these programs. So you can reverse serious eye disease in 3 days. It's happened over and over and over again. I want the ability to have you share, of course, we usually start these programs on a Monday. And I walk into the room and everybody, I mean, they're just depressed. They are not looking good. They're so beat up. They're so frightful and afraid of their future. And that's the typical Monday person that I see. Then we start what we start. And on day 3, which is Wednesday afternoon, we run them through their evaluation again. And all of a sudden, what was fear is now joy, laughter, embracement as they leave knowing that their eye disease had been completely turned around. That they're jumping. One fella here will tell you, I didn't believe him when he said it. I had to go check him again. He was right. He jumped 10 lines on an eye chart in 3 days. Now, come on, that didn't even seem believable to me. But that's how rapid these responses can occur. So I want to play that. How am I going to get to the? I want to get.
had a stroke, and that was near the occipital nerve, and it ended up taking half of my vision off of each eye. And also I have glaucoma, and I have really not had a lot of hope until I experienced this program here that I read about, and I'm so fortunate that I joined, decided to come and experience a great improvement in my eyesight. It's been amazing, definitely measurable, both by the charts and the equipment, testing in the beginning and in the end, but also my own personal experience. I felt the difference, and I feel the difference, and of course I can see the difference. The clarity is amazing. The small letters that I can read and see now is a marked improvement. I'm really encouraged. I am very glad I participated in joining the program.
I'm Melba Green, and I'm Laney's wife, and I was ready for him to do anything that would bring hope into his life, because since his stroke he had been very depressed and not hopeful because of the information that all the specialists, MDs, optometrists, and ophthalmologists gave him. He found this program and started reading about Dr. Condroit's methods, and we were very impressed by that, if a little doubtful that it might be true. When we got here, the staff was cheerful and welcoming. They were also energetic and organized. And the results of the 3-day intensive therapy have been astounding. Yesterday, when we walked out of here after reviewing the test, my husband's face was aglow. I hope you can experience the same thing.
I'm Sandy Paulson, and I was diagnosed with cataracts. I came to the clinic, and to be honest, from the first day to the last, it was like getting new windshield wiper blades. You know when you drive your car and you turn on the wipers, and they just don't clear away all the muck, especially when you're in some dusty, dirty place, and it goes across the windshield, but it doesn't clear off the dirt. So I've been looking through that for the last 6 or 8 months, and on the last day, I mean, it was just like I got new blades in my wipers, and it's so much better. I was out taking pictures this morning, and I can see so much clearer. So, Courtney.
Dr. Courtney, a 3-day program, and coming down with severe glaucoma and severe in both eyes, and right eye was even worse than the left, and could not hardly read any lines on the vision chart. And after taking the 3-day program, I was privileged to say that I could see down to the 5th line and read it, and just amazing results. And even my left eye vision improved. I could get down into 2020, and even said maybe I read some in the 2010. Outstanding program that made a believer out of me, that anybody could gain this much with glaucoma, where I've been told that no vision would ever be gained back. And it was just a great experience, and the staff and everyone was so wonderful. We just appreciate everything that Dr. Courtney done and the staff, and this program is truly amazing. You need to try it, and man, it's overwhelming what it'll do for you.
Was these kinds of responses are very routine for me here. I'm glad I could share a few of them with you. And I want to end with a final video. Whenever you come to Pittsburgh, as I said, I'm not an eye doctor. And I believe that everybody who comes here deserves to be evaluated by a professional. So even though I do my own evaluations in my office, I don't count. Thank you very much. as big as we can get it.
It's being weird. Let me play this on my computer so I can get to it. Hold on, just give me-
Okay. So while he's trying to bring that up, I'm talking about the fact that 15 years ago, when I began these programs, the very first thing I did was go out and recruit my own eye doctor. I felt it was mandatory that a professional saw a patient, especially imagine traveling all over the world, and meeting an anesthesiologist on this other side didn't even sound right. Okay. So, oddly enough, when I asked Ed about doing these programs, I said, Ed, I'm a little queasy about doing the programs. He said, why would that be? I said, well, Ed, I'm not an ophthalmologist. And then he said something very profound. He said, why in the hell would you need to be an ophthalmologist? You're the one that taught me these therapies. And so I went, Ed, you're right. I'm not going to be worried about not being an ophthalmologist. I'm going to go get someone that has that expertise. And I've got the magic. I taught you about it. And now I'm able to, reproduce that myself. But the eye doctor component is key. So what I have here is a short recording with my eye doctor being interviewed about these last 15 years and what she has seen. Remember, she's conventionally trained. She knows, at least when I meet her 15 years ago, that nothing can be done, right? She's part of the community. And so I explained to her, Dr. Lisa, I'm going to need to use your expertise. I'd like you to evaluate when patients come here. I want to bring them all to you first. I want you to do a complete evaluation to let me know where we stand as we start on day one. She said, oh, yes, Dr. Courtney, I think I can do that. Very good, Lisa. She's got all these special machines. And I don't have those machines. So that evaluation is very complete. But I wasn't done when she thought I was done. I said, and by the way, Dr. Lisa, on the third day, I'd like to bring them all back and have you redo an evaluation. And she looked at me very strangely and she said, what on earth would you be bringing these people back in 3 days for? I said, well, Dr. Lisa, I expect them to have profound changes and improvements in 3 days. And it was at that point that I then observed for the first time what I referred to as the famous Dr. Lisa Bowen eye roll. It went something like this. No words, just the eye roll. Well, here's Dr. Lisa. It's 15 years later, and someone is interviewing her on what she has observed now over the 15 years. And I'd love for you to hear that, because coming from a professional that was so negative on day one, and now my biggest admirer 15 years later, do you have that to run? Okay, let it go.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Courtney, and I'm here today with Dr. Lisa Bowen to discuss her involvement in Dr. Courtney's 3-day eye program. She's been with him since the inception of the program. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning.
So, how long have you been an eye doctor?
I have been practicing for 19 years at this very practice. My first job out of school. I also was a patient here long before I was the doctor. So it's a pretty cool place to work and pretty cool place to be.
What type of patients do you typically treat here?
So I pretty much treat everything here. We do routine exams, glasses, contacts, obviously. I treat many medical conditions, glaucoma, macular degeneration. Those are pretty much the two that Dr. Courtney and I have been working with over the years. We also treat or deal with cataracts, red eyes. So kind of the whole gamut. We pretty much do everything.
So As the eye professional that's evaluating Dr. Courtney's patients, I'm sure you're aware of the void in conventional medicine
Exactly
for
right.
these patients.
Exactly right.
How do you feel about the current medical treatment that's available?
So the reason I love working with Dr. Courtney so much is because a lot of these patients that are into homeopathic medicine, they have no choices when it comes to their eyes. You know, if you have other systemic issues, you can go to homeopathic, holistic medicine, like we've discussed before, excuse me, but there's no real eye care protocol other than Dr. Courtney. So the reason I love it is because we have treatments for glaucoma, we have treatments for macular degeneration, you know, in Western medicine, we'll say, or what we're doing now, but those don't always work for some patients. Some patients have reached the limit of what we can do medically, surgically. Some things like macular degeneration, excuse me, there's not a great way to treat it other than injections for patients, but that's only specific types of macular degeneration. So these patients, unfortunately, are at a loss. There's no one else for them to guide them or explain things to them. So between Dr. Courtney and myself, I feel like we have a really good relationship. Obviously, you know, we're here to do the things that he does with the patients and see where they are, but I also really like it because he and I work really well together, where I'll call and say, this is another condition that we have to have our eye on, or, you know, there's some other things that maybe we need to do before we start the program. So I really like that it does fill that void. You know, there's only so much we can do, so this is something that gives those patients hope where there wasn't any before.
So knowing the seriousness of these eye diseases, how did you react to when Dr. Courtney asked you to come on board and what his intentions were?
So first, I was extremely skeptical, just because in school you're taught a certain way, you know, we're very stubborn. Once, you know, we know the path and that's where we want to be on. So first I was very, very stubborn about it. However, I did a lot of research on what he does. You know, we discussed it, we talked about it, and then I started seeing the patients, and that 100% convinced me. When you see these patients that are literally losing their vision in front of your eyes, and for them to notice the difference is so rewarding. It's amazing because patients, they will go blind otherwise. So it is very, very rewarding to see what we're doing. Fantastic.
How many patients have you and Dr. Courtney treated over the years?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I'd say at least 100. I mean, it could be more. It's over 15 years. I mean, we've done many, many different 3-day protocols. The cool thing is, though, we see them from all over the world. I mean, we've had patients come from India, from Africa, to do this treatment program, which is just, it's amazing. It's really cool. So we've seen quite a few patients, and I hope to continue seeing them because it's really, really fun to do.
So Dr. Courtney describes his protocol as 85 to 90% of people will have a significant improvement in their vision in 3 days. And have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. I do multiple tests for patients when they come in, pre-Dr. Courtney treatment and post-Dr. Courtney treatment. So we're checking vision, we're checking pressure, a lot of times I'm checking visual fields, we're taking pictures of the macula. So when I see them back day 3, and again, very skeptical at first, thinking, what are we going to do in 3 days? It's amazing. The difference in patients' peripheral vision is significant. The difference in patients' central vision is significantly improved. You know, I tell patients all the time, these patients are low vision, mostly patients, right? They're not 20/20 patients. So sometimes it's hard to kind of measure where they are as far as acuity-wise because they don't even measure on the chart. And I tell patients when they come in, you know, don't get discouraged by the numbers. When I see them back day 3 and they say, Lisa, like, I can do things today that I couldn't do yesterday. You know, those are things you can't necessarily measure, but I hear it all the time. And these patients are now doing things that they haven't been able to do. They can play cards and see the cards. They can go fishing and see the bobber. So these are the everyday lifestyle things that I think are so significant to patients and why this works so well. And so absolutely I see it. And I show my colleagues, and again, they're completely blown away. This just doesn't happen. We don't see an increase in visual field. You know, we don't see improved vision with patients with macular, but with these treatments we definitely do. So it's really cool.
So these participants are coming from across the United States and across the world, and they get confident in your ability to be their eye doctor forever. How have you seen that their vision has responded long term?
Long term. Everybody at this point is holding steady. We have had a couple patients maybe that they had one disease and another disease kind of came in. Cataracts is kind of one example where cataracts, Dr. Courtney, I have been working on cataracts for a while. Cataracts are very hard to gauge. You kind of want to get cataracts before you kind of start noticing issues, and a lot of these patients are older, so there may be other interventions that we have to do. But overall, they are so happy. And you know that because they keep coming back to see us, right? They keep coming. I say, when have you seen Dr. Courtney? If they're not necessarily following him routinely, they're following me routinely. So we can be in communication if there's any issues. But no, these patients are pretty much long-term patients. Even patients that are out of the state, sometimes out of the country, they are coming back. So that is definitely a significant indication to me that what we're doing is working.
So what advice would you give to patients that are considering going through the 3-day eye program?
Absolutely. I think if there's a condition that you have that, that you're struggling with, that you don't necessarily even want the traditional treatment. I mean, we've had some patients that are very anti-surgery, very anti-medication. So these are patients that I feel like if you think you have a problem and you're not happy with your current treatment or what you've been told, I definitely think it's worth to talk to Dr. Courtney and I. I mean, I can even do a preliminary exam just to kind of give you a second opinion or kind of make sure we're all on the same page of where we need to be treatment-wise. But absolutely, I think we're doing great in that regard for sure.
Well, thank you very much for talking with us today.
Absolutely. It was wonderful to be here, and I hope to continue working with Dr. Courtney into the future.
Hello. You are about to listen.
Okay, we're on now. So I've shared with you my eye doctor, who I just love having her. And with the 15 years under her belt now, she becomes one of my greatest advocates, you can understand. But I've given you a picture today, a well-rounded picture on something you didn't know was possible. And if you are afflicted, I don't see personally how you can not pursue this treatment, because we sure know where your current eye disease is going to wind up. So I would encourage you to explore this even further. There are 3 ways to do this. Obviously, the best way is through a 3-day program. It, of course, it's the most expensive program, but because you're with me for 3 days, I'm in control of the results that we get. There's a 1-day program for those that just can't afford it. And then that FSM machine can be purchased separately and people can get the benefit of that on their own. So with all that being said, then, I think in terms of the what I wanted to say to you as a group, I've now come to that conclusion. I'll be happy to answer any questions. If Joe would prefer them to be in a roundtable discussion. Okay, so there's a question in the back, Joe. I'll wait till you can hand walk a mic back there. Gentleman in the back.
FSM, it's frequency and modulation. What does the S stand for?
Frequency specific. It's frequency specific. So microcurrent has been around for a while. There are many units that have been sold, but the majority of these units are not frequency specific. They put out multiple frequencies that have no focal point, and for that reason, they're relatively inexpensive. But when we deal with frequency-specific microcurrent, I can program into the device the actual frequencies I want. And I actually have to use a little paradigm phrase, which is the issue with the tissue. So the programs that I developed for each individual or for them only. It's their own unique program for their eye disease and probably consists of about 18 to 20 frequency pairs. Each pair is developed by using the mantra, the issue with the tissue. So I've already told you, I know what the retina vibrates at, 37 hertz. So the second line, the tissue, it's 37 from 1 to 18. That's the tissue I want to vibrate. But you didn't know this, but let me let you in on a secret. Every pathology also has its own frequency. And I happen to know what the frequency is. And the frequency, let's say there's one for inflammation. The frequency is not to light you on fire like a Buddhist nun, okay? It's to put out the fire. And it gets put out in a nanosecond by the use of that pair. So there's one pair of the 18. The issue is inflammation. The tissue is retina. You can see how a program can be developed through all 18 pairs. The whole program may take 35 minutes to go through, but it covers every aspect of your disease. And that's why this is the magic box. This is why this one is what allows me to do what I can do in 3 days. Any other question? Yes, ma'am. She's going to bring the.
Okay, do you always start adjusting the frequency of the retina regardless of what the overall circumstances in the eye? Because
So,
if you do that, how does that affect the evolution of the other negative factors in the eye, like a hole in the macula, or how does it make the cataract go away, or
we're talking about two different things.
or
Now.
how does it affect your astigmatism? Or these all different
All
frequencies?
right, so let's break the eye down. That's a very good question. So there's three chambers in the eye. There's the anterior chamber, where the cornea resides. And so you mentioned the word astigmatism. This is a irregular curvature of the cornea. I have no effect on the cornea. So if you have corneal issues, which are usually refractory issues, you need to go to an optometrist where they'll either use lenses, corrective lenses, glasses, or contact lenses to get that focal point to hit directly on the retina, and you'll be able to see just fine. The mid chamber is where the lens resides, and we do treat cataracts. Our response in them is not the 80 to 85 to 90%. Our response is around 60%. And it's all based on where the cataract is, because that can be posterior, anterior, or either side. And we have a certain, Dr. Lisa and I have a certain expectation once we know where it is to know what your success might very well be. But the essence of your question was that, look, if I have your diagnosis and it's a retinal disease, I'm going to use that 37 in every single frequency pair. The only thing that's going to change is the pathology to comprise the entire program. So I have a special program for cataract. That's true, because I know what the lens is supposed to vibrate at. Conventional medicine doesn't seem to know that. Did I answer your question, young lady? Jesse.
Yes, Dr. Courtney, how are you?
I'm doing well, my dear. Nice to see you.
Great. This is for a friend of mine. I was bringing her this morning and she was sick this morning, so she gave me all of the details to tell you. Dry macular degeneration, geographical atrophy in both eyes. One eye is 20/50, the other eye is 20/60, and she has been told there is no help.
Well, you gave me the diagnosis. The moment you said macular degeneration, all the other descriptive words is just how far this disease has gone. My job is not to be concerned with the add-ons. Once I am able to have the macula as a part of the retina, which is the macula is a large part of the retina, healed, and I do so by giving it a blood supply and start to provide the nutrients that it needs and the toxin removal that is required, in 3 days, I'm pretty happy, and most patients are extremely happy with their progress. Now, on day 3, they go home, but they leave with the very equipment that they were taught how to use during the 3 days. They are not done with their treatment. In fact, they'll be doing a treatment every day for the rest of their lives. I have patients that I treated 12 years ago that I still see in my office that send their machine in to get it rehauled. They would take that machine on every trip they ever made. They would never miss because they knew one day where they were going. That got turned around, and it's done nothing but improved ever since. So I would recommend that every single person that would do such a program would continue it, because you don't want to go back. And if you stop this, you will go back. Next question. Sir, again, you have a question? Go ahead. Hold on.
Courtney, would you just explain, this is the this frequency-specific microcurrent machine that they take with them. That's part of the program.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's the magic box.
Yep.
It's programmed for that particular patient and their disease. And so they obviously have to take that home, and they're going to be doing that program every day. Now, there happens to be 10 programs that I can program, and 4 of the slots are used for the eye alone. But there are 6 open slots. And what I do is give you a menu like you're at a restaurant. And I had you go through, and degenerative joint disease, gallbladder, you name it. I have programs to work on all of those. And so I advise people not to go home with any empty slots, that between you and your partner, share the machine and let he or she benefit while you're able to treat your own eye issues. Question, go ahead.
Dr. Courtney, I have several small blind spots. When you reverse the macula, can you regain those blind spots?
So, as I told you, and now I tell everybody in the audience, the gentleman has macular degeneration wet. You don't mind me saying that, do you? And as such, the people with MACD lose their central vision first and maintain their peripheral. So when he's looking forward, what's directly in front of him is blurred. And what will happen over time is the central blurriness will extend into the periphery. So everybody with MACD has what you call a blind spot, but that's the very spot we need to eliminate. So our goal is to heal the macula, which controls that central vision, so that you're able to see through what you referred to as a blind spot, which I intend to chip away at. I never know how much of that I can remove, but it is going to be obvious that much of it is removed after that 3-day program.
I had several questions. The first one is in regard to floaters, what your comments are in regard to floaters. The second question has to do with, my understanding is when you go to the eye doctor and they put the eye drop in your eye to get a better look at your eye, that is not a healthy thing for your eye. And it can actually lead to macular degeneration. And so I was curious about your... Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So the first one, I don't remember. Floaters. Yeah, so there are plenty of debris and toxic substances that float within the aqueous and vitreous humor. So the anterior chamber and the posterior chamber have a liquid, and things float in it. And when light enters the front of the eye, as it moves backwards to focus on the retina, anything that floats by gets reflected in what you perceive as a floater, but which is nothing more than debris in that particular chamber of the eye, inhibiting the light flow on the way back. So was that question answered?
Does your program help with that?
So if we get a healthy retina, we will minimize the issue of floaters. I never use, and you've noticed I haven't ever used the C word. That's a tough word for a doctor to use, cure. So I'd like to think I'm going to benefit everybody. The degree to which is going to be substantial, but to say I'm going to eliminate, boy, I can't say that. Your second question regarding the use of eye drops for an eye exam. So those drops, by the way, they do not lead to any permanent damage, especially they do not lead to MACD, which you, I believe, said. So what that does is dilate the pupil. The doctor has to look into the eye and look at the retina itself. It's the only place in the entire body where we can see a capillary network is right there. And so the eye is great at diagnosing and supporting diagnoses for all sorts of diseases. But certainly if you have a retinal disease, looking directly at the retina, although I can do it, I leave that up to Lisa. That's her area of expertise. But every single person has that evaluated. She takes a picture of the macula, and she can tell on day 3 how that picture changes. So it's extremely important.
Okay. So she does use those.
Yes, she does.
She does dilate the pupil. Okay. What is Dr. Lisa's last name?
Dr. Lisa Bowen. Her practice is in McMurray at a business referred to as the Eye Gallery. Okay. And if you're looking for an eye doctor that's a little different than most, I'd highly recommend her.
Okay. And last question. The frequency-specific microcurrent, is that similar to the Reams machine?
Very familiar with the Ream frequencies in that, yeah, there is a crossover. But because Reams never knew the specific frequencies for any organ, it was a mixture of a number of them. This takes that to the next level, where we can specifically, through computer, actually program the actual frequency, which I actually know the frequencies for every single body part that you own. That's a real advantage, isn't it? Because if I want to work on any single part, I can't. I tend to use this machine, however, mostly for eye diseases.
So to piggyback on that, how does it compare to Rife frequencies?
Because Rife is not specific.
Not specific
and this
enough.
is specific.
Okay.
I'm able to dial the exact frequency that I need, and you can't do that with the Rife.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, sir? And another one back there.
I'm just full of questions. I hear a lot on the radio lately something called GA or geometric atrophy, which I have, according to what they say. I recognize the symptoms. Is this also included in your treatment?
Did you say LDA?
What they call GA or geometric atrophy, I think it is.
Okay, I don't think I'm hearing you. What is the actual
geometric atrophy?
Oh, so this is the add-on words. This is the next step telling me how far progressed your disease has gotten. So the first word is the only word I'm interested in, and that is you've got wet MACD. All this other stuff is descriptive. It does delineate for someone who reads your record how far you have progressed, but I don't get myself immersed in that. Don't worry about that. If I can heal your retina, all that stuff goes by the board. Okay? Yes, young lady.
Oh, you're so kind. I had the opportunity to speak to you on a Saturday. I'm Christine, so I work with Nutritional Frontiers.
Oh.
Hi, nice to meet you in person.
Yeah, I talked to you on the phone.
Exactly.
You live in Florida, don't you?
I do.
And you're a tennis pro.
I am.
I
See?
know all
Look
about
at
you, young
that.
lady. Okay.
All right, now we know. I had the glycomic cyclic crisis, is what
Yeah,
they
I
called it.
remember you did.
Yeah, and so I'm down to just having some floaters in the eye now. So everything else seems to be coming
Wonderful.
online, right?
Yeah.
So are there some things that you can do nutritionally or with toxicity that would help eliminate that debris as you've described it?
So I have people that describe floaters all the time. So what could be floating back there? Okay. And that becomes a matter of, I know the categories of things that can be floating back there. Some of those are metals, heavy metals, and there's certainly a way to help rid yourself of those.
Sure.
If it's actual tissue, which in your case, because you had your natural retina tissue involved, it could be the remnants of that tissue that are now healing, and that are in an inordinate number of them. So you're noticing them, delineating them as a symptom.
Okay.
I think the good news is with time, those debris will ultimately rid themselves.
Okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, are some of the things that you described in terms of making sure you get blood flow to the area or trying any of the frequency modulation, would all of those things like speed up the reduction of those floaters? Or,
You provide a greater blood supply.
And it should help it heal,
That
right?
will absolutely help.
Yeah, that's what I was
Absolutely. And 37,
thinking. We can do that. We can rebuild it. Okay.
you can. Yes, up front. He's coming with the microphone.
I have diabetic retinopathy.
Understood, ma'am.
I've had this shots done in my eyes and all that.
Yes, you have.
What can you help?
You saw that on my list, didn't you? So with great interest, when you saw that, every single thing I've had to say, pretty much talking about MACD, just please insert the name diabetic retinopathy. It's the area of the eye it's a retinal disease. Now I have different programs. I have to program my treatment different. So your particular program is going to be completely different from somebody else's. But that I've treated you many times over, I expect the same results in you that I would get for anybody with any other disease. And so this is a progressing disease. Your vision is affected, and there will offer you nothing other than the occasional injection to stop the bleeding. We don't want those injections. And many patients who go to Lisa actually, before they see their retinal specialist, I tell them, don't you go to the retinal doctor until you see Lisa first. She will let you know whether you need an injection at all. I don't like to speak negative about my colleagues, but it's just gotten to the point where the retinal specialist has the ability to do that, and he gets paid handsomely to do it. And I have a feeling many of these injections are getting done that don't necessarily need to be done. If I'm crazy, so be it, but I'm too cynical to think that this is all on the up and up. Next question. Yes, young lady in the back. We'll come to you in a minute.
I just wondered if you've had any success treating cysts on the retina, a small cyst.
Cysts on the retina. Okay, if that is a growth, an abnormal growth, I don't see myself being able to alleviate you from a tissue formation. This is going to require the skill of a, I thought I shut this thing off. It's off now. So that really does need to be handled by a retinal specialist, who can surgically or through lasers. I think the laser technique is going to be the most prominent way to treat your disorder, not me.
to your question, if you get the retina vibrating at the correct frequency such that it's healing itself, whatever that cyst is made of, sebum or minerals,
tissue.
Wouldn't your
It is actual
body
tissue.
just like correct itself? And just, like if you get acne on your face and then it heals up, through the use of proper diet and
Yeah.
things, couldn't your eye do that?
So,
It seems like there's hope.
all right. Boy, I like the fact that you're giving me powers that I don't yet possess. And I'll take that. At least you've really opened your mind to all possibilities. But I'm talking about a tissue growth here that is abnormal. If that were to be on the skin, that would be called a benign lesion, not a malignant lesion, and it would be surgically removed. It would be cut off. Anything that I would do won't dissolve tissue. That's not how what I do works. Next question. It was up here, Joe. Yes, ma'am.
Unfortunately, we were late coming in. We might have missed comments about dry MD.
Yes. Okay, let's talk about dry. So macular degeneration has two forms. Dry MACD, which MACD always starts out as. But ultimately, in many cases, it changes over to wet MACD. So what's the difference? What's dry and what's wet? So in dry MACD, there is no retinal bleeding. But what happens as these diseases advance is that the vasculature, which is not healthy, these blood vessels in the back of the eye are very fragile. They are subject to breaking. And when they break, they bleed. And now you've made the crossover from dry to wet. And what accompanies that crossover is the desire on the part of the retinal specialist to inject anticoagulant material so that it literally stops the blood flow at that area. Now, in a way, I guess that's good. But in another way, what the heck are we doing here? Okay? Because it does nothing to improve your condition. So people are lined up for these shots. They're scared to death to go to the retinal specialist once a month. They know exactly what's going to happen. They're going to get another injection. They hate it. And so I say, go to Lisa. She'll let you know whether you can skip that appointment or not and spare you the fear. I'm not going to interfere with an ophthalmologist or a retinal specialist. His expertise is what his expertise is. We need them. If you use the diagnosis of glaucoma, I have to trust either Lisa or an ophthalmologist to put you on drops to lower your intraocular pressure. I never prescribe that. I always allowed the ophthalmologist to do that. And I never would DC or discontinue any drug that the ophthalmologist puts you on. What I do is extra, but what I do is magic. And we're able to restore vision to people that are losing it rapidly.
It's just science you haven't learned.
Isn't that true? Very true. Yeah, Jess.
Glaucoma.
Yes. What about glaucoma? Glaucoma is another one of these retinal diseases. It's the only one of all of them that leads to total and complete black blindness. It starts out by involving the periphery. So unlike the MACD patient who loses the central, the glaucoma patient loses the peripheral. Doesn't know he's losing it, but it's closing in. He has no idea it's closing in. He's seeing everything just fine. And so when he gets into about here and somebody calls him over there and he has to go, yeah, Joe, what do you want? He says to himself, hey, why did I have to turn to see Joe? And that usually prompts him to see an eye doctor and the diagnosis of glaucoma is made.
Is everybody looking like to the side right now, like I am, and just seeing if you have that?
Yes.
My dog had cataract surgery, and after surgery, they said, oh, he's got glaucoma.
Now, what I don't know is if 37 is the frequency for the retina of an animal, if that can be found out, we literally can treat that dog. Okay? The veterinary literature should be able to provide that. I have never read any veterinary literature. There always is Dr. Mike, yes. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
How many attendees do you limit your seminars to in the 3-day program?
I usually limit my programs to no more than 5. I invite the families of the participants to also be involved. Many times I have had to install bleachers. I say bleachers because the whole family came and they all were worried about grandma. And I made them involved with the entire program, just like grandma was, so each one of them could help grandma when they got home. So we limited to 5 patients, but in terms of the army that comes with them, I'm there to help. We need to have the family involved. Next question. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me to share what I believe to be a miraculous treatment that no one seems to know a thing about. You are now my advocates. You have spent the time with me. You know where to send people. You can send them to that website. They need to call me and talk to me. The situation is not dire. It needs to be intervened with, and the sooner the better. And so, yes. It's the size of what we used to call, back in my day, a transistor radio. Okay? I don't see anything that size anymore, but you know how it was. Yeah, some of the earlier cell phones, correct.
Okay, so Dr. Courtney, thank you. Wow. Yeah, you know what? Last time was good. This time was great. And
really enjoyed it.
Oh my God, yeah. So, yeah, just a couple of things. Relieving pressure, increasing blood flow. We're all about that here. We can help you increase blood flow. We can help relieve pressure, and a couple other things. Like, what's the effect of blue light on all of this?
Blue light is really dangerous. You need to be using blockers for blue light because
These
it's
are
very damaging.
blockers.
Okay, you can see you've got that. And so I would say that everybody should have lenses that keep out that form of infrared.
And it comes from any flat screen, whether it's a computer or a phone. It comes from fluorescent lights. Okay, there's all kinds of sources of blue light. Now, there are nutrients that protect you against blue light as well. And those are all in the 2020 formula back here. These are nutrients that won ingredient of the year, Lutamax. It has both kinds of zeaxanthin, astaxanthin, and lutein. And that does protect against blue light. So we're all in this together. And if you have any questions,
in the program, the vitamins and minerals that I choose from Nutritional Frontiers. So we were ultimately going to have a conversation about this if you participated. I need to get you started to start replacing these things that you don't have. And we only use exclusively the products that Nutritional Frontiers puts out. So yes, they do have those products here. And once we got into that conversation, it was inevitable it would be coming up. But I'm glad Joe mentioned it to you today because you're here.
One more, Christine?
So what are some of the things you would recommend, Joe, for increasing blood flow and circulation? And don't we have a new product that might help with that?
Yes, we have absolutely things that help with blood flow. CircuCore has been one of our number one formulations for a long time now. It helps with blood flow by increasing nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. That helps blood flow. The 7 Flowers formula has been around forever, and that'll reduce pressure. Okay, so those are two things that will immediately affect the health of the eye right off the bat. And if it's inflammation, and then there's nothing better than SPM. And now we have the first in the world liquid SPM. Just introduced yesterday. These are pro-resolving mediators that will come to the aid of systemic inflammation. And if it's behind the eye, that's exactly what it is.
With the blood supply, it will rot. So there again, we need that blood supply to deliver.
Okay, if no other questions. Okay, so it's original formed in a soft gel. The liquid is going to bypass the digestive system and get directly into the bloodstream. So it's always a quicker delivery method and a better uptake of the nutrient. Liquid, you just swallow it. Yes.
I was on the air for 23 years, 3 times a week. I enjoyed that, but it's been a number of years now. I get invited on a few radio shows, but
Well, where were you last Saturday?
I was actually invited on Dr. Ed Solkowski's radio show at 9 o'clock on Saturday mornings. I'm frequently a guest on that show.
What station is that, Doc?
That's 1250. It used to be WTAA. Now it's called The Answer. And Jesse is a constant listener. Yeah.
I do give my dog 20/20. I give him 2 tablets every morning.
Great.
She is using your product.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, if you want to just before you leave, take a look at this testimony from Dr. Bob Rakowski, who will be here Saturday. Okay. And this is his testimony on SPMs. This is from last April.
All right. Happy, beautiful evening. Dr. Bob Rakowski, functional medicine specialist, Houston. All right. Happy, beautiful evening. Dr. Bob Rakowski, functional medicine specialist, Houston, Texas. For about 5 years now, I've been working with Nutritional Frontiers. Absolutely love them. Detox formula is absolutely the best. I love their Calm Days. By the way, I also love their Omega SPMs. If you're not familiar with those, might be the best advance in nutrition, who knows, of this entire century. What I love most about them, customer service, always putting their doctors first, helping us win through great products, great education, service second to none.
So, Doc, you're going to stick around for a few minutes in case
I'll stick
anybody
around
wants
if
to talk
anybody
to you?
wants to ask me any.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.